Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, January 6th, 2012. Iran, once again, the big story. They just finished about 10 days of war games practicing to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passageway on the eastern Persian Gulf and the southern Iranian shores where 30 to 40% of the world's oil passes through every year. And they're threatening to shut down this strait because of increased sanctions against them for their nuclear program. The West says is for nuclear weapons, and Iran says is for the peaceful production of energy. Now Iran is threatening the U.S. Navy. You know, the USS Stennis, an aircraft carrier, left the Persian Gulf when they were doing these war games, and now Iran is saying the Stennis and any other carrier should stay out of the Gulf. Well, the Pentagon is ignoring the threats, and they say we're going to keep conducting business as usual. Boy, it just keeps getting hotter and hotter over there. Meanwhile, it's been announced the U.S. military will conduct military maneuvers with the Israeli army in Israel. Now, this has been done in the past, and reportedly it's a pretty large maneuver. But this military war game that's been going on, that is going to be going on in Israel, couldn't come at a more provocative time. Next up, the EU debt crisis keeps going on, and you wonder why it hasn't blown up yet. Well, according to one Federal Reserve former vice president in Dallas, his name is Gerald O'Driscoll, he says it's because the Federal Reserve is bailing out the EU. They're doing it with something called dollar swaps. They produce digital dollars, they swap them with digital euros, and they give it to the European Central Bank, and then the European Central Bank, the ECB, doles out the money and loans to troubled banks in Europe. Now, this is called a debt crisis, but it really should be called a European banking solvency crisis. And these banks are being floated, at least according to Gerald O'Driscoll, the former Dallas Fed VP. He says that, listen, they are bailing them out. They'll say it's not a bailout, but it's a bailout. And he also says that when you do currency actions like this, that it can hide what central banks are doing. And O'Driscoll says, hey, if you have to hide what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be doing it. I'll bet you he's catching some real grief from his former workmates at the Federal Reserve. Next up, Ron Paul. He came in a close third in the Iowa caucuses with the GOP. But now there are reports that there are shenanigans that may have gone on that could have cut Ron Paul's vote total. They had, the truck leaving Ames, Iowa, which happens to be a college town, Iowa State, where, Ron Paul, throughout the state, got about 50% of the young vote. Well, there were some problems with the votes on that pickup truck. Don't know if they got counted or not. It's weird that they put the votes on a pickup truck and it was driving around. They don't have cell phones, faxes. They can't tweet something, send an email about a vote total. Also, Karl Rove announced on Fox that, Romney was going to beat Santorum and by a small margin, while everybody, all the networks were reporting, hey, the race is too close to call. But Karl Rove had a source. Of course, nobody asked him what his source was. Also, Rove said that Romney and Santorum got in a room and had a gentleman's agreement to settle the race. Did they invite Ron Paul? Did they invite Rick Perry? Did they invite Michelle Bachmann to that little meeting? Listen, I don't have any proof they rigged the vote, but things sure sound funny. The mainstream media does an excellent job of covering events, and an election is one of their premier things they do, and they do it well. You cover events. And, they were talking to the caucus goers ahead of time, and overwhelmingly, Ron Paul was getting a lot of votes. And when the votes first started coming in, Ron Paul had 43% of the vote. 43% in the first 1 or 2%. Then all of a sudden, boom, he dropped down. Boy, that just sure seems funny and smells fishy, although I don't have any proof that they rigged the vote, but the Republican Party didn't help them out in terms of integrity anyway. The Republican Party, the higher-ups, I feel, do not want Ron Paul to get the nomination. I mean, Ed Rollins, who was a big Republican guy, says that, Ron Paul will not get the Republican nomination. How does he know that? I would like to see some of the people in mainstream media just ask, why don't you want him to get the nomination? Here's what they do love. They love the young vote that Ron Paul brings in, and they had a record turnout in Iowa. And it's been reported that if it wasn't for Ron Paul, they wouldn't have set records. That young people are flocking to this 76-year-old congressman. Next up, Dennis Gartman. This is my final story. Dennis Gartman is a big financial guy. He writes the renowned Gartman newsletter. He announced about 3.5 weeks ago that gold was no longer in a bull market. Sell, 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 sell. He also said that there could be wholesale liquidations of gold. This is what he said in his newsletter. He also said there could possibly be forced liquidations of gold. He sold all this gold at around 1650, 1675. Well, he came out yesterday and said he made a mistake. Gold is still in a bull market. He failed to buy back the gold after he sold it, and now he has said that gold is now still in a bull market. One newsletter writer bet Gartman $1 million that gold would hit $2,000 before it hit $1,000. He caught a lot of grief from investment newsletters and other people who are also experts in gold. And who knows, maybe that's the reason why Gartman changed his call. I think he changed his call because he was wrong. And you know what? I got to say one thing for him. He was man enough to admit a mistake. Well, that's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USAWatchdog.com.